Hello and welcome to the West Partnership Learning videos. This is for Health and Food Technology National 5 and we're going to go through a series of lessons on nutrition. Here are a list of lesson symbols that you may come across during this series of lessons. The main one being the write and copy symbol with the little pencil. The more notes you take, the better it will be for your own use later on. And please feel free to pause and rewind the video as much as you need to at any time. It is always going to be important to listen throughout. Not everything I say will be written down, so you might want to go back and listen to it and repeat it yourself anyway, as often as you like. Now, the word macronutrients, we're going to split into two words here. We've got the word nutrients, which are the substances we find in our foods that are essential to us staying alive, and the word macro, which means large. So we're going to be looking at the large amounts of nutrients that we need in our diet, and those are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. By the end of today, we should be identifying the food sources of where we can get protein, carbohydrates, and fat in our diets, and be able to explain the effects on health of these as well. In order to explain something effectively, we need to make sure that we are able to provide a fact and a consequence for each of them. So our three main macronutrients, which are the large amounts of nutrients that we need in our diet, are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And we're going to look at the function and the source of each of these. Now, the function is basically what job does this nutrient have in our bodies, and the source is where we are able to get that nutrient from in our diets. What food source can we get that nutrient from? So firstly, looking at protein, the function of protein in our body is to provide growth, repair and maintenance of body cells and tissues. Now this is something that all ages need, from babies, children, teenagers, going through rapid growth stages. They will need protein in order to grow body cells and tissues. And from adults and elderly, they no longer require protein in order to grow body cells and tissue, but to maintain. And for everybody, including athletes, protein is essential to repair body cells and tissues, for example, after an operation or injury or workout. A secondary source of protein in the body is to provide energy, something that we need to complete all activities. Now, protein can be split into two sections as well, HBV animal proteins and LBV animal plant proteins. So HBV stands for high biological value and LBV low biological value. Now, these get these names from having the high biological value animal proteins contain all essential amino acids, which are mainly animal sources or animal byproducts as well. Whereas low biological value proteins are lacking in one or more essential amino acids, which is what proteins are built up of. And these usually come from plant sources such as beans, lentils, and chickpeas. So moving on, who needs protein in their diet? We have already covered this, that everybody requires protein in their diet, from young children, teenagers, babies growing rapidly, as well as adults and elderly, to maintain body cells and tissues. As well as that, athletes who are training regularly will need to repair their muscles. Someone who may be lacking in protein in their diet could be a vegetarian or vegan, and that is when you should be looking at the LBV plant sources of protein in order to get as many of these into your diet as possible in order to gain the right amount of protein in your diet for you. So moving on to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates' main function in our body is to supply energy for all body activities and functions. In If we are getting too much carbohydrates in our diet, this could be stored and converted into body fat, which over a period of time could lead to obesity. If we are not getting enough carbohydrates in our diet, this could lead to us feeling as though we are lacking in energy and feel tired. Again, sources of carbohydrate are split into two. We have got starchy and sugary carbohydrates. Now, starchy carbohydrates are often called total complex carbohydrates, and the sources of these can be found from bread, rice, cereals, pastas, noodles, potatoes. Sugary carbohydrates are found intrinsically or naturally found in fruits and vegetables, as well as can be extrinsically found, which means added into fizzy juice, honeys, jams, biscuits, and cakes. Now, we know that too much sugar in our diets can be detrimental to our teeth, as well as to increasing the risk of things like type 2 diabetes. So it is important that we are making sure that we try to get as much as of our carbohydrate intake from starchy carbohydrate sources rather than sugary carbohydrate sources, particularly avoiding the extrinsic sugary carbohydrates where we can. These are often called empty calorie foods, which provide nothing but calories. There is no other nutritional value from these. So, who needs carbohydrates? Everybody needs carbohydrates to provide energy within their diet. So the younger or more active that you are, the more carbohydrates you would need to have, but these should be coming from total complex carbohydrate sources. Elderly, although they may be less active than teenagers, etc., they still require complex carbohydrates for energy, for bodily functions, but these should be including sources of fibre. So, for example, wholemeal breads, rice, cereals, and pastas, as this will help regular bowel movements and help to reduce the risk of bowel disorders in later life. So, the function of fats in our bodies are to provide us with a concentrated source of energy, as well as providing us with essential fatty acids. Now, essential fatty acids are something that our bodies cannot make. These are something that we have to get from the foods that we eat in our diet. Essential fatty acids are required to reduce the risk of things like blood clots and heart attacks. Um, Another function of fat is that it provides an insulated layer underneath the skin for warmth and also to surround and protect vital organs such as kidneys. Fat also can provide us with fat-soluble vitamins such as vitamin A, D, E, and K. And I think that most people know that if you have too much fat in your diet, then this could lead to things like obesity, and with that comes a lot of other health implications, such as having high blood pressure or coronary heart disease. Not enough fat in the diet is just as dangerous. I think quite often we assume that being obese or being overweight is a lot worse than being underweight, but these are just as bad as each other. And not only if you're not getting enough fat in your diet, you're not able to provide the protection for your vital organs or provide warmth for your body or energy, you're also not getting your intake of your essential fatty acids, which can put your body at risk of things like heart attack as well. Again, fat-soluble vitamins may be reduced, and all of these vitamins are essential in ensuring that we have a healthy heart. Sources of fat are split into two sections here. We've got animal sources and plant sources of fat. So saturated and unsaturated. Now, often a diet high in saturated fat or animal sources here tends to raise blood cholesterol levels as well as increasing the risk of blood clots and blockages to arteries. So having a diet high in saturated fat tends to increase blood cholesterol levels, particularly the LDL cholesterol, which is often known as the bad cholesterol. Unlike unsaturated plant sources of fat, which these help to lower the LDL cholesterol in our blood, and so in turn helps to keep cholesterol away from arteries, so reduces the build-up. Now, some sources of unsaturated fats include nuts, seeds, oils, and avocados. And animal sources come from animal products and animal byproducts. What your task is going to be is that you're going to be able to explain the effects on health of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Now, this is an example that has already been done for you, and you're going to be able to complete this for carbohydrates and fat, either in your jotter or paper. So you are going to complete one for carbohydrates and one for fats. And by the end of doing this, you should have been able to identify sources of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, looking at LBV and HBV biological proteins, as well as starchy and sugary carbohydrates, and also looking at saturated and unsaturated fat sources. When explaining the effects on health, you should be able to provide facts for protein and a consequence linked to health about these. For example, having a look at how having protein in the diet ensures growth in children during their growth spurts so that they are going to be growing as expected, as well as doing the same for carbohydrates and fats.